You can now order Dr. Larry Widman's book, Max Out Mindset. Go to performancemountain.com/Max Out Mindset. The link is in the show notes also.
At Performance Mountain, we've worked our entire lives to be elite in every sector. Now we try to give back. At Performance Mountain, we empower teams and groups to maximize potential, minimize friction points between groups of people, communicate at the speed of trust, and optimize performance when it matters most. Check us out at performancemountain.com.
You are listening to Max Out Mindset with your host, Dr. Larry Widman, performance psychiatrist and elite mindset coach to women in sports, business, and life.
Alrighty. Welcome to the Max Out Mindset podcast. This is your host, Dr. Larry Widman, sometimes known as Doc in the mindset world. I say I always do this podcast because I've been blessed over the 20 plus years or so to work with some of the greatest coaches, athletes, teams, leaders in the country. And so I love to share what I've learned from them. And then when, of course, I have a guest on, learn as much as we can from them. I always say my definition of maxing out is given the talent, the experience of the athletes and coaches, the depth, the health, and the intangibles. Can a team reach the limits of their capabilities? And then I always say, can they do it under pressure when it matters the most? Because if you can't do it when it matters, what's the point? So today we've got a great guest on today. Of course, it's my favorite sport, as you know, in the volleyball world. And she has a different experience, so we're going to learn from her. But she is the Director of Player Development for Premier Nebraska, a volleyball club. And they take a lot of pride in that as they're nationally known throughout the country. I think this is her 16th year there. She can comment more on that. She also coaches there. She also does color commentary for Creighton Blue Jays volleyball, a team that is near and dear to my heart. So, and obviously other roles as a spouse, as a mother of several kids who also play sports. So lots going on in her world. Welcome to the Max Out Mindset podcast, Shannon Smolinski.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk with you today. Obviously, we've crossed paths a bit through the club world and through a lot of the teams that I work with, and a lot of the athletes that happen to play at Premier Nebraska. I just happen to know for a variety of different reasons and working with their teams and such. So you heard me describe my definition of maxing out. What is it from your perspective? How do you define max out?
Yeah, for me, when I think of maxing out, I think of it from a broad perspective. You can say in that moment, whether it's a big match, or you can say something that's, leading up to what has allowed, that team or that individual to max out. And consistency comes to mind for me, because, I feel in that moment for that team or that player, or even that coach, is to make those bold moves to just allow themselves to go for it. I think that they've had to be really consistent within their behavior, consistent within their day-to-day training. That allows, whether it be teammate to teammate, if you have somebody that's really consistent day in and day out, there's a lot of trust there. They know that player can step up in that moment. Same thing within myself. If I'm consistent within my behavior, whether we're up by 2 points or whether we're down by 2 points, it's really being consistent within my behavior that's going to allow in that game, for our team to be able to do what they do best and max out.
Yeah, I love that. And I love it when you compare the word consistency to an outcome behavior, or an outcome meaning trust, because obviously that is what is one of the great separators in sport and in life is, can you build trust? And part of that as a great leader or coach is to be consistent. And then as a teammate to be consistent, for everyone to know what to expect within reason, right? And so I love that when you compare a word to an outcome that you see that actually translates into winning or to maxing out. So, all right, so tell us a little bit about your journey up until the time, basically to where you came to Premier. And then I really want to get into kind of what it means to be the Director of Player Development within a club system, and then obviously talk a lot about what Premier stands for and what you think about the whole volleyball world. There's a lot to cover in there. So tell us a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, so born and raised in Omaha, so Nebraska is home, and I kind of grew up as a tomboy into sports and my dad was really big with, outdoor, whether it be hunting and fishing. So I was really balanced as a young kiddo, playing whether it be softball or volleyball, and getting out to Mahoney State Park and doing all just the outdoor stuff. He had a friend that was a superintendent down at Mahoney. So we were able to do a lot of those outdoor things as kids. My sister, then she started getting into the club world. And so when I was younger, I kind of followed suit, as all younger siblings do. They kind of follow the path sometimes of what their older siblings do. So my sister, who's actually a director within Premier Volleyball as well, she's the director of our communications as well as our recruiting. And so yeah, I kind of was in the gym, just watching her grow up as a volleyball player, and then I followed suit, as I said, and then played club through high school, played high school, and then I started coaching. So Rick Welch is the club director of Premier Volleyball, and my mom and Rick had met when I played 15s. And so they've been together for 20 years. And so it's kind of a family. Premier is definitely a family. There's 4 directors. But anyways, to go backwards, I started coaching my senior year, and kind of got my feet wet with, just assisting and doing some camps and helping out with some of the younger teams. And then, didn't go into playing collegiately, just started, my college classes, and then started my journey within Premier. And as I was, going to school and became a mom, and, figuring out what that next step for me was within my career path, Amy McClay, who at the time was our director of player development. So that was back in 2011, 2012. She decided she wanted to go into teaching. So she went into being a teacher and coach at Marion. And so that opportunity opened up for me to take the player development role. So at that time, I dove all in. I fell in love with coaching, as I mentioned, when I was younger, and I just really found a passion for that. So yeah, that's kind of where we are today.
So you kind of grew up in the coaching world from a very young age. What attracted you to the coaching world? And then tell me a little bit about, I know you're humble, but in your own way, like, when did you kind of figure out you were pretty good at this thing called coaching?
Yeah, so I was really young when I, 18s, 19s, 20, I was pretty young jumping in, and, I started with the 13s and the 14s. And then in 2008, we had a couple names that you might be familiar with. Katie and Amber Rolfson jumped into our gym in 2008. They were with a really special group of kids that was a really pivotal building block within Premier Volleyball. So yeah, there were Marissa Johnson, Sydney Hunsley, Nicole Walker, just some really awesome people that we had in our gym at that time. And so Katie and Amber joined Premier, and that was at 14s. And, I was, just a young pup learning the sport of volleyball along with them. And we were a very, very good team nationally. And that was probably the first experience that we had as Premier playing at the open level. So for club volleyball, there's your open division, and then you have your national and USA and so on. And so the open is kind of the mecca, the high level. And so that was really my first experience, as well as probably our club, in not only playing at the open level, but really competing well. So at that 14s year, I then moved up with them, which we don't usually do. Premier is really big on having our athletes learn from different coaches. We've been blessed with a lot of really great coaches. So we don't usually have our coaches follow up with their kiddos. But for me, 15s was an age group that I really wanted to coach. And so it took me with this team. So I coached back-to-back 2008, 2009 with them. We finished top 10 in the country both years. And so that's probably when I realized, like, okay, I think not only do I have a passion for this, because I really had a passion for just the team, like just really being able to start somewhere with the team and really watch that process grow within that team. And then obviously to be really competitive was, it's kind of addicting, if you will. And so, yeah, that's probably when I realized that not only do I have a passion for this, but I might be, okay at it too.
I love that. So one of the things you said about Premier is that you like your athletes to be coached by different coaches year to year. Give us a little bigger picture of the philosophy of Premier Volleyball and, kind of its mission, its why, and how does that align with yours?
Yeah, I'm glad that you asked that question, because that's something that's really important to us. So this is our 25th season. This year we'll be at Premier Volleyball. And Rick Welch, his mission statement was, not only are we trying to build and empower and teach young women the sport of volleyball, but we really want to help grow them as people as well. And so for me, stepping into that director role and really taking in a lot day to day and working with our athletes and families, that is something that we is the backbone and the foundation of us, is really making sure that we are not only we're trying to learn. We're trying to, learn from the best of the best. So whether it be your coaches, your cooks, your booths, we're trying to learn from the best of the best and teach that, like even with like our little kindergartners, our little stars program. But we're also trying to build up these young people. We're trying to love on them. We're trying to push them. We're a little bit old school. None of our, every program is different in regards to how they, run their club, and each club's identity kind of has a little bit of a DNA of who they are. And I think it's great for families to be able to find what fits their family. And for us, we're kind of built on that backbone of, not everything is going to be given, it's going to be earned. And so whether it's from our tryouts to the role, all the way to, when these kids, if they want to pursue a college career, whether it be a scholarship or even playing time then. So yeah, that really just kind of embodies, Premier Volleyball and what we stand for. And so yeah, I try to uphold that every single day.
Yeah, that's really cool. And of course, you mentioned some great coaches that you kind of like to track. Of course, that's my time to give Coach Booth a shout out, because you mentioned this notion of empowering young women. And if there's one thing that stands out in my alignment with her, among other things, is that her belief that her goal is to empower young women to know that within reason they can do anything in their mind they set out to do. And we also say that by the time hopefully they're through college, that they know how they want to be treated by others, and they won't accept anything less. So this growth of self-esteem and value, and separating it a little bit from volleyball, but to teach that this is all more important for life than sport, even though if we're going to play a sport, we might as well be competitive and have a lot of fun and try to win. And I think that's really cool that you have that alignment, because not everybody does. Like you said, everyone has a DNA like that. So take us and give me a little deeper dive into what it means to be the director of player development. I'm curious about that.
Yeah, so I get the opportunity to work with all of our athletes. So from 11s to 18s, when I took over in that role back in 2011, 2012, I think back to where we were and maybe who were some of those kiddos that we had in our gym. And so at that time in 2011, our 11s and our 12s were like your Sammy Clarkson, your Jaden Centeno, your Megan Scove-Sendy. And you think of just those little young athletes at 11s, and then all the way through 18s, and some of those kids that have come through our door. And so my job is to be able to work with all of our 11s through 18s through position training. and just roll out the foundation, whether it be technically or whether it be how we're approaching it within our mindset on what we want that to look like. So I'm super blessed to be able to work with all 270 of our athletes. So that's during the season. And then when we're in off season, then, I'm tackling camps, and I'm tackling, just kind of resetting the year. So it's a blank canvas every year. And then we'll kind of jump into a new season this next year. But so the director of player development, coaching and developing our whole club. But then I also have the chance we have about 70 coaches on staff. So, I'm able to also work hand in hand with a lot of great people. So we're really blessed to have really good relationships with like your coach Booths and Coach Buttermore and all the different coaches around the area. So we have a lot of different college athletes that will come in and coach with us as well while they're playing collegiately. So it's really cool for them, whether they're alum and they're popping into our gym to help me through position training, or, if they played against me, right? So they played in another club, but maybe they're in Omaha. So it's been really cool to be able to have those coaches come back and coach and work hand in hand with our athletes. But so I'm also able to work with our coaches and kind of build them up as well. I think that's something that we do well, is we have really good relationships with our coaches, and it's a home for them. They're an extended piece of us. So not only is Premier founded as we're a family, the 4 directors are a family, but we also have our coaches as an extension of our family. So it's pretty cool too.
Yeah, that really is cool. So tell me this, you've been doing this a little over a decade then in this role. What have you seen change the most in terms of what you have to do, or include in there some of the challenges that are maybe different today than they were when you started?
Yeah, I think within the game itself, it's changed a lot. The speed of volleyball has really changed, even with the younger kiddos. I would say the speed, I think the exposure to the game of volleyball is getting younger and younger, because we have great high school coaches, great club coaches. So I think the exposure to volleyball is a lot younger. So I think you're seeing volleyball being played at a higher level at a younger age. So, when our teams go and compete nationally, they do a very good job, because they have, your Nebraskas, your NAIA levels, your Coach Booth at Creighton. You're seeing volleyball played at a very high level here, and so they're exposed to really great programs, and so they're training at a really young level. So I would say that's probably I see it's starting a lot younger, the speed of volleyball. I would say the challenges, I think it's getting tougher and tougher for there's a lot of pressure on these kiddos, and I don't think it's just for volleyball. There's a lot of really talented athletes in the Metro. I don't care if it's swimming and diving, or if it's football, basketball. I mean, you're seeing just a lot of really, really high level, high profile athletes here in the Metro and Lincoln area. And I think that, whether it be the pressure to play all year round with different sports, the pressure to be in strength and conditioning, they're balancing a lot. Plus they have school, and a lot of these kids are high achievers. And so, not only are they excelling on the football field or volleyball court, but they're also, trying to excel in the classroom. So I think for kiddos, I would say the challenge is making sure that you're being really aware of meeting these kids where they are, and knowing that, they might be coming to you. We only get them 2 days a week. So the difference between us and high school is we don't see them, every day. So we only see them twice a week for 2-hour practices. And so, and in that, they also might be playing, another sport, and we encourage that. We definitely want these kiddos to be playing multi-sports if that's something that they want to do. But sometimes it's hard for them. And so, meeting them where they are, if they're tired because they have a heavy load, and maybe backing off some jumping. So I would say that's probably the biggest challenge, is making sure that we're being aware of understanding these kids have a lot on their plate. And there's a lot of pressure at this stage.
Yeah, you brought up a really good point, though, that you only get them for, a few hours a week. How do you go about building a collective team, even though you're together for several months, right? You don't get each other a lot. It's not like high school when you're together every day. What do you do at Premier to help these individual teams now, once they're formed, build a really cohesive and collective group, all trying to head toward the same goal?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. We want to be able to, some programs might have master coaches, and that master coach might train like that whole age group. For us, we've had coaches in the gym coaching with us as long as I have. And so I feel that there's a lot of cohesion within our philosophies, and there's a lot of cohesion within how the process is from the start of the season to the middle to the end. So there's a lot of communications that we're doing prior to tryouts, as well as prior to the season, on some checkpoints, if you will, on where we should be, within our chapter, right? So if we're in the first chapter of preseason, what are some of the pivotal foundations of technique and things that we should be introducing to our team? How we have team moms, and we have different teams do their own thing. And I feel we kind of lay out different ideas for our coaches, and whether it be for team bonding, or whether it be, technically what we're doing within practices. But I think our coaches do a really good job of communicating with one another, seeing what other people have done, whether it be, team bonding. Coach Wessel, he's our 17 gold coach. He also coaches at Millard West. So while, yes, we only have them for, a short amount of time weekly, since you do have those long seasons, and maybe you have your travel, let's say in a February or March, you try to use those as, stopping points of your season, then to kind of turn the page into a next chapter of, whether it be, your team bonding or your team meeting. So I would say our coaches do a really good job of making sure that, whether it's individual one-on-ones, whether it's, team bonding where the parents are setting up some team bonding from month to month. I feel we've just been really blessed with some really awesome coaches that have learned from each other, and have kind of just, taken the reins to do that each season.
Yeah. How do you deal with the disappointment of kids or parents when they don't make the team they want to make?
Yeah, that's probably the hardest day for me, is tryouts, because we'll have our 11s through 14s, they'll go first. So we'll have our 11s through 14s, they'll go through their tryout. And like I mentioned earlier, it's a blank canvas. And so, we want to put out a product. We're really prideful in putting out a product at Premier. Our main thing is our coaches. So, we will only fill the teams that we have for quality coaches. So, in filling those coaches, and then having those tryouts, we try to prepare, I think, is probably the biggest thing that we're doing leading up to tryouts, is making sure that we're preparing the kids and the families for, what's to happen at tryouts. So, not one kid, even from your Lindsay Krause's to your Sammy Clark, from anywhere, your Katie Rolfsons, like none of the kids that we've had in our program have ever been guaranteed, not one. And so, that's something that, as much as they're coming in and they don't have the guarantee, well, we also don't have a guarantee of who's coming to tryouts. So, we have a plan in place, and we have a very well-oiled tryout system, but you just never know who's going to potentially be there. And so I think preparing families for what that tryout process could look like, as well as, these are the coaches, these are, if you're not making the top team, we've been very fortunate, like our second, our third, even our fourth teams are competing at a really high level. So I think maybe 10 years ago, 8 years ago, if somebody didn't make the top team, they would walk and they would go to a different team so they can make the top team. I think the culture that we've built in our gym is, a lot of the families, they're just wanting to make one of those 40 slots, if you will. If it's, if we have let's say our 14s and there's 40 spots, we're getting those kids that are just really wanting to be a part of the Premier brand, the Premier product, the Premier training. And so, you're seeing less and less of that, of kiddos walking if they're not making a team. And so, yeah, I think that's probably what's been the most that's changed. So it's made it a little bit easier because you're not having maybe that, top team only stigma. You still have the challenges of, you might have a kiddo that's been with us for 3 to 4 years, and then you're getting a wave of kiddos that are coming in maybe from a different program that just want that experience. And so then that ripple effect happens where there could be, that 1 to 2 kid, and then maybe that kiddo gets, beat out. And that for me is definitely, especially with the younger group, that for me is hands down the toughest part of my job.
Yeah. So I know that you have added other things to the mix, because we talk about the physical, the technical, the tactical, and the mental. And I did my research on a gentleman that helps you out in a significant way, because I was looking for somebody that I had a really high level athlete that needed in the gymnastics world, needed a strength and conditioning person. And Gibby Duvall, was the one that I picked after studying a lot of people. And I see he's very involved in your program. Tell me what having in-house strength and conditioning does for a club program.
Yeah, Gibby's like the brother that we never had. So Michelle, my sister, she's my only sibling, so it's just the two of us. And so Gibby's been with us for a really long time. Actually, Zach, his brother, was the first to be, with Premier when he started Explosive Edge, and then Gibby was with him. And then when Zach went on to Buffalo, I believe, to start his journey within the college rankings, then Gibby had taken over. But yeah, Gibby's been with us for, I want to say, almost 18 or 19 years. I mean, he's been with us for a very long time. I think the thing that's so unique about our relationship is we are very value aligned. He is, Gibby is a great person. Gibby is very passionate. Gibby is just does a really good job of working, and evolving with his coaches. Sometimes in our profession, you have, your whether it be your interns for him, and they kind of stop there, and maybe then they go on to the next ranking. That's kind of the same with us. Like you might have your Ben and Angie Bolts who come into our gym, and your Noels and your different college coaches that might, have this as a stopping point, and they'll go on. I think what Premier does well and what Gibby does well is he's always evolving, and he's always, teaching and molding these coaches to, continue to grow, but not overgrow for what he can handle. So I think he puts a premium on quality within his product over quantity. And I think, so to pair that with, our values, it's just been really great to have somebody like Gibby that is so value aligned with Premier. So yeah, they've been with us for about 18 years or so. They then moved into our facility. So we kind of renovated our facility and fit them in. We took out 2 courts and put in some turf for their side. But then another side has just Premier exclusively. Diane Banderas, she's been with us, I want to say, probably 5 to 7 years. Diane has been with us as our director of Premier through XEdge. And so it's been very advantageous for us to be able to have them in-house. I think what Diane does really well, speaking on what Gibby does really well, and same thing, value alignment, she's able to meet these girls where they are. I mean, she was a college athlete herself. She is just really great about, not only empowering kiddos to feel strong and to feel healthy, but to do it the right way, whether it be the eating habits or, I think there can be that stigma of, lifting and becoming too strong, right? And so I think it's really great to have her, and the kids can go into her office and, they can kind of bounce some ideas off of her if there's any, injuries or anything that's bothering them. So it's just been a really great resource to have in our facility, as well as something that I think really helps prepare them for college.
I love that. So of course we've hinted at the role of the coaches. Obviously they do a lot of different things, but in terms of your philosophy and how you train people and teaching techniques, and then the strategy part, we're talking the physical side here. So for you in particular, and then just your overall philosophy, like what role do you think mindset plays in the overall performance, and how do you go about addressing that again when you only have kids there for a couple hours a week and you have a lot to accomplish?
Yeah, a lot. So yeah, I don't think when I was younger coaching, back in, 2008 and 2009, that was not something that was relevant for me. It was just definitely, what can we absorb as much as we possibly can, with the technical and the tactical. And, back in 2015, when the Final Four was here in Omaha, the AVCA clinic, comes into town as well. And so I had joined that weekend to do some AVCA coaching clinics. And a class that I sat in was coaching with clout with Maura Kanim. And so at that time, that would be now when your Sammy Clarkson and Haley Zorowski, those kiddos are now 15. And I just was really interested in what she was saying with coaching with clout and just, really talking about the mindset piece of volleyball. And she brought in the DISC assessment and just talking about different traits of personalities and just how that plays a role into the team dynamics. And so I reached out to her. And so that's kind of the first dose, if you will, of that mental training. And so we incorporated that season. And then the next season, I don't know if necessarily we did that with that team, but then in 2018 was then when I had Nora Sis and Lindsay Krause and Fiona Schrader and a lot of, very high quality kiddos. And, they're freshmen, right? So not only am I the director of player development, but for a long time, I've been our 15 gold coach. And I love that 15's age group. They still have Christmas morning where they're just very eager to learn, and they're young enough to, still have that, that passion of not that at 16s or 18s, they don't, but those kiddos still have Christmas morning. And so, but they're old enough to start integrating different pieces of whether it be the high level training or the mindset piece. And so for me at that time, this is a very high level team that has a lot of different personalities. You have your high dominant to what I always call Nora as like a golden retriever. She's like your supporter. And so I thought it was really important for us to talk about how we talk to people and how, maybe somebody who's not like you. And so for them to learn that was really important. We also met with a gentleman called Alex Dorr. At the time, he was starting his career within the mindset world. His aunt is Cy Wakeman. And so she did a lot of work with like your bigger corporations. And so Ditch the Drama was something that was what they did anyway. So he came in, he was trying to incorporate that with youth sports of Ditch the Drama and what's real and what's, kind of an editorial, if you will, that you made up in your head. And so we kind of just, start talking about these things. And we had the opportunity to bring him in and work with our parents separately, our coaches separately, and then our athletes separately. And so, that as well as, even dating back, at Boys Town, their staple for, how they would do things. So it's been in our gym. And to speak upon, like, as you mentioned, like, how are you doing that when you only have, a couple times? I would say, whether it's, speaking to them, or whether it's, putting on the whiteboard of these are our goals, whether it's getting uncomfortable and allowing them to just trust that it's okay to make mistakes. And, I think just really reminding these athletes that, how we're teaching them not only, what we're doing with passing and setting, but you're also putting those Easter eggs of that mindset piece of whether it's, the trust, or whether it's the consistency, all those things. So, and then, we just have to be creative within the time of the season to, bring in those pieces, whether it's a disc assessment or, your Alex door. And we've been really blessed. A lot of our high school age athletes have had the opportunity to work with you within their respective high schools. And so it's becoming a lot more relevant and a lot more front of the brain, if you will. So I just think it's a lot about how we're talking to these kids to implement those Easter eggs of the mindset.
Yeah, I love that. It's really interesting that when you really study and talk to the Olympians and professionals, all the way down to these high school kids, they share some common themes. And a lot of the high school kids don't think they share the themes with the ones they see on TV that are at the highest level, but the things that I continue to see are the things they all struggle with are self-talk. They struggle with confidence. At times they struggle with composure. And it's all wrapped around this bubble of perfectionism. And it's really fascinating to see. And I think it's enlightening for the younger kids to see that the best struggle. I would say the best struggle with everything you do. They just get very good at having awareness of what they struggle with and a strategy to deal with it. And I think that gives a lot of the younger kids hope that there's not something broken in them or there's something wrong with them, but they also have to acknowledge that if they don't get better at it, it kind of starts to cripple them if perfectionism takes over and they can't deal with failure and their self-talk goes so poorly. If you were to observe in the last couple of years, both as a player in player development or as a coach, what are you seeing the high school athletes that play at the club level, which are the ones that in general are trying to play at the next level, not always. What are you seeing that they struggle with the most here over the past few years?
Yeah, I think the perfectionism, to be perfect, allowing themselves to get uncomfortable. I think we talk about that message is very constant in our gym, allowing themselves to be comfortable being uncomfortable, but that's really hard for them. I think, for all athletes, whether it's volleyball players, and I think especially in the high school ranks, it's, as much as kids are different now with what they're exposed to within, the social media and what they're seeing, kids are still the same. They still want to be great. They're still innocent. But I think, the pressure of being perfect, they maybe didn't see it, 10 years ago from, a kid from California or a kid from Texas. So there wasn't a lot of comparison to themselves of who they are compared to that person. And I think there's just a lot of I just think that there's a lot out there that kids are having a hard time with understanding what's real and what's not real. And it's okay for them, to get uncomfortable and to not be perfect, because even what they're seeing, like your Jordan Larsons and, your Maddie Cubics and at any level, or maybe it'd even be that high school, team that, you've seen from another state or even within our own state that you're like, wow, that team is perfect or that player is perfect. Well, what they're not seeing is what that player struggles with. They're only seeing what's out there on social media, and that might be the wins, or it might be the high kill ratio, but they might not see that player's bad day, or they might not see, what that player maybe struggles with. And so I think our kids have a hard time of separating, comparing themselves to others. So we always try to tell our kids, even my own kids, like, put your blinders on, like, put your blinders on and just go. There's a documentary called The Defiant Ones, and it's actually really good. It's about Jimmy Iovine and Dr. Dre, and it talks about their journey and how they met with one another, and both were really high achievers for where they wanted to go within the music world. And in one of the clips, and I would send it to some of my teams too, but in one of the clips, Jimmy Iovine talks about, the reason why a horse, the horse racing, those horses have blinders on is because if they were to look to the left or to the right, they would stumble. And just that is why everybody should have blinders on, is because if you do that, you're going to stumble. So just look straight ahead and go. And so to answer your question, I think, for kids to allow themselves to be uncomfortable and to not let themselves be perfect and to look left or to not look right, and just really allow their journey to be their journey, even if that does come with struggle. I would say is probably the biggest challenge that our kiddos are dealing with today.
Yeah, I love that you use the word comparison. So I'm so glad you put that word in there, because that's so tied to perfectionism. And I always say there's wonderful things about social media, and then there's just horrible things. And one thing about social media is it's not kind to perfectionists, because of that comparison, and there's so much fake perfectionism on there, and it allows us to compare, right? And if we could get out of that mindset, like you said, I always have the quote, comparison is the thief of joy. Because when some of my biggest perfectionists that I've had to deal with, some that have been very open, I've written in my book, in my podcast, like Jaylee Winters from Creighton, Justine Wong-Arantes, who's the libero for the national team, both as high level as you could ever get, but comparison for them and perfectionism for them, especially perfectionism, just stole the joy. And they both had to work through that, or their careers were going to be very different. And so, again, I think kind of good for most athletes and ladies to know at this age that it's very normal to go through those periods, but then we have to acknowledge it, and we have to work really hard by visually, like almost hypothetically, putting our blinders on so that we can focus on the task at hand and not anybody else's journey, right? But it's so hard today. And so talk to me about this. So obviously, as I was looking back and at the history of Premier, it's been filled with players going to the next level, right? But if we're being honest, over time, right, for a lot of probably different reasons, and I want you to share, there's been a momentum, right? I mean, more players have gone to the next level, and more have gone to even bigger name schools, even though I want to be very quick to point out, because I have so much, I'm so impressed by the NAIA level of volleyball, and I get to work with a few cool teams, locally in Bellevue and Concordia for the last several years. Just started helping out Morningside, but to be able to watch those teams at that level, I don't think these ladies don't realize how good they are. So I'm not diminishing that role at all, because I love that level of volleyball, and plus D3 and D2. The D2 good teams can beat half the D1 teams, but more and more of your athletes seem to be finding their way to some really top D1 teams. What do you think Premier has done better over time, or how much, what do you think are the reasons why there are so many more names going on to big teams, including, just for the timing of all this, we have an Oregon commit as of yesterday, right? So I mean, they're going everywhere around the country, which is really cool. What are your thoughts?
It's a little bit, when you think about the journey of Premier, and you think about, the athletes that have come through our gym and have, been able to obtain their goal of playing the next level. For us, it wasn't about how many Division I athletes can we get. That's just not who we are. Our goal is to make sure, our goal is to make sure that our kiddos are finding the best fit for them. So whether it be the location, whether it be the level, so for us, it's not about the Division I, because like you said, we are really blessed here in the Midwest, as well as in Nebraska, to have such great programs within your NAIA, JUCO, anywhere. So for us, that is not, the end all be all. how we've, been able to obtain over the last handful of years where, yes, we are, having really, high level kiddos come out of our program and going to big names. It was just those high level kids were maybe just going to your Creighton or just going to Nebraska. Now they've really expanded, and you're talking Purdue and Louisville and Oregon, and you have to attribute it to the growth of volleyball just in our state. To speak about what on what I was speaking on earlier, with it's just continuing to start at a young age. These kiddos are exposed to it at a very young age. My daughter, she's only a fourth grader, and she's, playing, club because, she wants to, because she's been around it. She's seen it so much. And so I think, with high school and with club, I think we've done a really good job of developing these young ladies to be able to achieve that goal. But I also think, Premier has been able to play it in front of a lot of really great coaches. They have a lot of exposure. I mean, club volleyball, we'll go over President's Day, and some of our teams will play in Kansas City at Triple Crown, which I, ran into this last year. And back in, when was that? So then the group now that's freshmen, so this 2019, we went to Triple Crown and they won it as 15s. And that is just incredibly hard to do. And it's funny because who we faced in the championship, Macy Bosiger was on one side and Little Cubic was on the other side, so you start to just little by little compete. I mean, Nebraska and Premier Volleyball has just little by little just compete, train, compete, train. And, we're a small population in comparison to the Californias, the Texas, you're playing against Willie McGinnis's kid, right? Like you're playing against very, very big, prominent names and people and population. And so for us, it's, it's just be gritty and you got to train defensively. And we've just really have hung our hat on ball control. And so Premier, over time, we are not going to be the biggest, but in our gym, our emphasis was defense and ball control. And so we saw like your Brittany Witts and your Libby Kokels and your Andy Hannes, like these names, back in, 2011, 2012, they were going to these big colleges, but it was more of in a defensive role. Like we didn't have these big hitters, right? And so then over time you get your big names, your Rolfsons and your Krauses. And, as Premier just kept competing and winning, then you start to get eyes on these kids that, maybe might not necessarily get the eyes on them as well as, one of our athletes that just committed, she's about 6 foot, but she's touching, 10-3, so you pair that with what X-Edge is doing and you pair it with what they're doing training wise, and then you win, here or there, you win, you're going to get coaches. And then you start building that relationship. So, you build relationships with Oregon and Michigan State and Kansas, and you have them come to our gym. Like we've had your Sheffields and your Jarrett Elliott. You've had, they come into your gym. So over time, you build relationships. Over time, you start developing, these kiddos and that ball control, and then you start getting some of these big kiddos. And yeah, so I would say, yeah, over time, it's just been a process to get there. But I think we've just put a name on ourselves just by, hanging our hat on just that old school ball control and just that will to win, if you will.
Yeah. Tell me about the feeling that you had and that the club had in general. It wasn't that long ago that one of your teams won a national championship, right? And so again, while it's not all about winning, on occasion when you have somebody just do it at the highest level, right? There's just a pride, or there's a lot that goes into that emotionally and mentally. Tell me what went through your mind and give me a sense of what that was like when you saw a team, not that it was just a couple of years ago, won it all.
Overwhelming. It was very overwhelming. I think for me, when I think back to that moment, I was overwhelmed with the response from so many alum or past families, former coaches, current coaches. I just the overwhelming response of how happy and genuinely people were just so excited and happy for Premier to, that was our first open national championship. We had a handful of national level championships. That was our first open one. And the cool thing, there was so much adversity. I don't know if you know the story of that 2021 championship, but there was a lot of adversity within that season. And it's interesting enough that the team that we played to win it was called Adversity, which is ironic, but we were really, we only had 8 players. And then 9, Lindsay went down that season. She had a little injury to her knee. Nora Sis was trying to break her, record. She was adamant on winning that Class A high jump. So when we're getting into April to go to nationals, she spent, Lindsay's slowly coming back, and she goes into a libero role. Like, she hadn't played for months. So then that was, what kind of role is Lindsay going to go, if at all, like if she was going to play. We had a defensive player earlier in the season tell us that she, was going to go to prom, which is, totally fine. That's something that, the seniors we deal with as 18s. It always hits that, that nationals versus prom time. And then that week, like that Tuesday, Monday or Sunday or Monday, and we're getting ready to leave, then that Thursday, player decided not to go. And so I'm, scrambling. So Sky McCune was on our 17s. We brought her up, a couple weeks. She'd only maybe trained with us a couple times because she was playing on our 17 gold team. And, I'm reaching out to our 17 gold team. Hey, can I borrow a hitter? Then our 16 gold. And then, they're in the heat of their season. So, it wasn't surprising that, they weren't really, wanting to risk an injury, which is rightfully so. So I had to knock on the 15 gold coach, which was myself, to see if they would allow a kiddo, which, so I was the 15 gold coach, and I'm like, all right, medic, what do you got? So we brought a freshman outside up, and so that was Tuesday, and we left on Thursday. And so she maybe practiced with us for, one time, and we go there, and, that team had never won an open level tournament. Like, they'd never won. It's crazy when you look at that team. Your Fiona Schrader, who's at Notre Dame, they were a very, very successful team, but they could never get over that hump of winning, those big moments. And so when you look at the championship run, it was almost as if they caught lightning in a bottle. They played so free. There was so much love. I look back to, a moment during that set point, match point, and I see Nora and Lindsay and the bond that they had with one another, and just seeing Nora be able to win MVP. And it was, overwhelming, I would say, is probably what I think of. But there was a lot of adversity that got us to that point. And I couldn't be more proud of that group.
Isn't that cool? It's so common for me. People think that teams that win it all, they probably just had a perfect year. Nothing went wrong that way. And every great team I've been on, some are open for everyone to know the adversities. Like, it's obviously everyone knows Lindsay hurt her knee. And then there's a lot of things behind the scenes of great teams where you have to work through adversity that maybe never gets out, that has to remain private. And so, but what's interesting is you never mentioned a single volleyball skill that helped them win it all. Now, I always say, to be in the discussion, to win it all, you have to have the talent, but we're not even there, right? You mentioned being free, you mentioned love, you clearly mentioned role acceptance, right? None of those things are what I call volleyball skills. They're the non-technical skills of our sport that I say, if you can crush those along with the talent, that's what gives you your best chance. It doesn't mean you're going to win. As you pointed out, they had never won a open title during the year, but you never mentioned a volleyball skill. And I always try to remind people that it's not going to be the volleyball skills that determine if you max out. If you don't have them, we're not even in that discussion of winning it all. You might max out, but not for a championship. So I love that you pointed out all the things that went wrong on a team, but then what did they do about it, right? They accepted their roles. They joined a team. They got outside their comfort zone. They were free, playing free. And love, I think, is the common theme of every great team I've been on. I know people say, well, I don't understand that. What does that mean for athletes? That's a whole other topic, but you've got to figure out a way to love and connect on a team if you're going to do it under pressure. And unless you're an occasional freak team, that rarely happens anymore in this world, where you can hate each other and still win. But the parity today just doesn't happen very often. So I love that you shared that story, because there should be a lot of pride in that for a club that works really hard to develop athletes from all levels. But then, of course, you want to see a team do something that nobody else has done on your club. So where do we go from here? I mean, where do you see Premier in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think for us, every year that we set out to, start that new journey with that, group of teams and families and athletes, for us, it's, are we continuing to put out a good product? Are we continuing to help give our athletes the resources to become great at volleyball and to become, great people? And so, the sport of volleyball within club, there's so many different ways that, you can tackle it, whether it be on the developmental side, whether it be the club side. So for us, the club world for us has been the most important to us when it comes to our club teams and making sure that we're giving those kids the opportunity to grow. But I think for us, we also want to make sure that we, can find an opportunity to give back to the community, to give back to maybe those athletes that aren't able to make a Premier team. What are we doing, maybe over the next handful of years to, find a way to give back to those athletes as well, to become the best version of themselves. Because I think when I think of Premier Volleyball, I think of the families, and I think of the coaches, and I think of just how lucky I am to be where I am today because of the families and the coaches that have supported me. But there's also been a lot of people that have come across our path that have also challenged me. And so I think for the future of Premier Volleyball, it's what can we do within that community, whether it's our own Premier community or whether it's in the sport to help grow volleyball with, maybe on the developmental side, or, maybe, it be to those that, are just trying to learn, the sport and to continue to get better. So to answer your question, where are we from 3 to 5 years? I hope it's, continuing to play at a high level, to continue to grow coaches and to grow people, and to, continue to have great families, because we really are blessed within our program to have some just really awesome families that come through our program, come back to our program. And like I said, when we won that championship, they come back and will reach out from time to time. So just continuing to evolve and to grow is probably, our goal and where I see ourselves in 3 to 5 years.
Awesome. So I got one more question for the women out there that have multiple roles in their life, right? How do you balance it all and be able to give to the, like I said, you're a wife, you're a mother, you work, you've got side gigs. Like, what's the best advice you can give for high performing women that are trying to figure out how to do it at a high level without feeling the guilt or worry that we're not getting everything we needed to accomplish in our different roles?
Well, first, speaking as a mom, my husband has been great. He's played sports his whole life. He's coached the boys. We have twin boys that are juniors in high school. And as I mentioned, my daughter is a fourth grader. So that, they're very busy within, their sport world and, their extracurricular activities. And so the support of my husband is, definitely something that I wouldn't be able to do everything and be everywhere if I didn't have the support of him. And he does a great job with that. But when I think of it in a larger scale, I would say, being able to delegate and trust the people around you is probably the only way that I'm able to do what I do. But I think it also allows us to help grow our coaches and put them in those leadership roles. So I'll oversee a lot of our stuff, and I'm very active and present on the court with a lot of our things, but there's some camps that will have our other coaches lead. And if I'm not delegating and allowing them to do that, it doesn't allow me to be other places, be a mom or to do color commentating and things of that nature. So I would say, trusting in the people and delegating is probably the biggest advice that I would give to those that are wearing multiple hats. But again, I can't, speak enough on that. I've surrounded myself with a lot of similar minded people that are very value aligned, and having the kids being in the front of their brain, making sure that what we're doing is for the best of the kids. And I think I've surrounded myself with really awesome people, and so I think that makes it a little bit easier for me to delegate, because we've really been surrounded by some great people. So
I love that alignment of time and effort with what you value. One of my key ingredients of leaders, great leaders. So, all right. Any last thoughts from you? Anything else on your mind? Anything that I didn't ask you or that you want to make sure that you share?
The only thing that comes to mind is, I just think of how grateful I am to be in the role that I am to work with young individuals. But as I mentioned to you, off air, I'm just a total nerd when it comes to high school sports and college sports and just sports in general. And I think what a really cool time we're in right now, just in the but in the state of Nebraska with, boys sports and girls sports, and, just being able to see kids excel at such a high level, but not only excel as athletes, you're seeing just really great kids in the community doing really great things in the community. And so I just think what you're doing in just, whether it be the mindset world and with volleyball, and whether it be your X-Edge and what they're doing with athletes on that side of things, I just think kids are really blessed here now in this state with the resources that they had. And I just think to kind of sit back and just to really think of how lucky we are, and to just really admire the coaches and the families and the athletes and everything that goes into it. It's just been kind of surreal for me as a mom to see that within my own kids, as well as the kiddos that I'm coaching. It's just been a really fun time over the last handful of years. And I'm just really excited to see whether it be the sport of volleyball or other sports, and how that continues to grow here in the state of Nebraska, because I think we're just doing some really awesome things. And so kudos to all those people that, not, just the people that are on the court, but people like yourself, hats off to you that are giving back to all these kids, because they're so lucky to have everybody.
Yeah, that's an awesome message. We really are lucky here, right, in the state of Nebraska with the resources we have, and having clubs like Premier Nebraska, right, who are not just doing wonderful things for Omaha, but for the state and for the nation, and allowing a lot of ladies to reach their dreams, whatever that looks like for them, which is really cool. So thank you so much, Shannon, for being on the Max Out Mindset podcast. I really enjoyed speaking with you.
I so appreciate you having me and taking the time. So I can't thank you enough.
Awesome. Thank you so much.